Hi, I'm Matt Kennedy, and we're standing in Gallery 30 South in Pasadena. As you can see, my wife is here as well. She's the co-owner of the gallery. Gallery 30 South is an atelier space for the Novia line of insomnia jewelry, as well as an exhibition space that I program in Congress with my other gallery director duties at La Luz de Jesus Gallery. The exhibition that we have on the walls right now is called Birds of Death, and it's from artist Tom Neely. Tom Neely's an Ignatz Award-winning comic book artist, and since this is also the 10th anniversary of his The Blot comic, we decided to feature some highlight pages from The Blot on the opposite walls, and I'll offer those up for sale to people that have never been offered for purchase before. Let's show this in order. Let's have a graphic novel on gallery walls exhibition, and let's let people get a chance to see it at least for a month in a nice open, bright white space, so that they can absorb it and kind of take it with them, and if they are so inclined, to hang on their walls at home. What's great in that it is an adaptation, most of these are splash pages, and so each is kind of a singular image, and Tom's a genius of composition, but he has many different styles, so it's kind of great to see this work across from a work from 10 years prior that if I hadn't told people, they perhaps wouldn't realize it's the same artist. I like that kind of sense of versatility. And he also created a new piece specifically for the show, which kind of closed off the adaptation and kind of the emotional damage that he felt in this portrayal of being sold this bill of goods, that this adaptation was official. And we've got this other piece right over here, which is really great. But as you can also see, we've got on the table, Tom made some pins, some cloisonne pins, enamel pins, as part of this event, and you can see the jewelry. So the jewelry is part of the insomnia line, and my wife works under the artist name Novia, and this space, this gallery, of which he's the co-owner, is her creative atelier space, and so we also use it as a sort of boutique that she can show the new jewelry that she's been working on. And one of the pieces that we have here right now, which is kind of amazing, is this piece right here. And this piece was just collected by the Danish National Gallery, and we're actually going to be flying to Copenhagen for the opening reception for that exhibition, where it's going to be in the museum. It's part of their permanent collection, and it references some of the pieces in the Danish archive. So she had been working in 3D printing a lot of her jewelry, and the company that does a lot of that replication for her held a contest to see how to highlight 3D printing, to elevate 3D printing into an art form unto itself, and recommended that people choose certain paintings that were in this Danish collection in Copenhagen. We've got a couple of the daises here featuring different types of pieces from the Novia collections, and a lot of what inspires these pieces, if you look at some of these, you can see that there's a lot of element of insect and bird and just the natural world in general. And so some of the pieces are reminiscent of talons and beetle antlers, and the way that she's brought it back into a design sensibility plays into her education. She has an M.Arch degree from SciArc. She's Japanese, and I think that this different perspective through a very high quality and very thoughtful education process has amplified her creative process into a kind of future noir type of thing. I've always said that it looks to me kind of like science fiction goth, which I'm sure she would disagree with, but when I first started looking at her pieces and started to introduce her to artists like H.R. Giger, there was a great affinity there. People who didn't quite think of the status quo when they produce a new body of work, especially creatively. And with jewelry is such a personal thing. What's been most interesting about it is that men and women both love it. Right here we're standing in front of some of the pages from The Blot by Tom Neely. And this is the 10th anniversary of his releasing this. He self-published it. It won the Ignatz Award. It was an early victory for him, which I think emboldened him to be able to think, hey, I can do this for a living. And he's been relatively successful since. He's done quite well. But what's great about sequential art is that Every page is a representation. Each individual page is a representation of the entire thing. And even something like this, which is a self-contained story, this is a graphic novel that exists only between the pages of that single graphic novel. It wasn't serialized in individual issues that were released over time. It did not have a sequel. So what you're looking at is a few select pages from this one thing. So contextually, as a work, it is one work. But when you look at this, if you are not familiar with the rest of these pieces, it doesn't have the context of the things that are around it. You just see this character that is illustrated in a very kind of 1930s comic book style or comic strip style, and you see this ink blot that's emerging from this. And maybe it's nightmarish, maybe it's humorous. You're going to bring to it the emotion that you bring to it. As you zoom back, and you see that there are multiple images that tell this one story, it changes this. This is no longer just this page. It is no longer just this image. This becomes one panel in an ongoing story. And that's what's kind of magical about sequential art, is that you can love just one thing. You can love one page. You can see one image and find it iconic, and it can just signal something to you, an emotion, cause you to feel a certain way. And you can choose to limit yourself to that. Or if you're buying, say superhero comic art, then if you buy a page from a Batman comic, that page doesn't just represent that image, it represents that hero, that you know the history of Batman, that you know that there are thousands of comic book issues dedicated to that character, that many stories have been told by different writers. He's been drawn by different artists. This represents that incredible rich tradition. And in a greater sense, it represents all superheroes, because it represents the idea of the hero and the hero's journey. So in a single purchase, in a single art purchase, you are now owning a great sense of one of the mysteries of human existence. Why are we here? That this story represents the hero's journey, that there is this man that experiences tragedy, and he turns his tragedy into a positive thing in order to help other people, in a 50-cent pitch. That's what it boils down to. And so if you like other characters from this character's history, if you like the Joker and the Joker isn't on that page, you have in the back of your mind, maybe the Joker isn't on this page, maybe he's right around the corner. You can bring in elements of other parts of that narrative to give yourself a different context for that piece. Your imagination is important. And that's why, as kids, we're so drawn to these illustrated stories, because we put down the comic book, we had to wait a month for the next story to come out. Our minds go crazy with that. We explode. We start to make up stories where we're like, wouldn't it be cool if Superman fought the Hulk? An impossibility from a copyright holder's point of view, that a character from a DC comic and a character from a Marvel comic could meet. But as a kid, if you're reading those two titles, you're doing that in between every issue. You're bringing these other stories that didn't get told to other people, that have existed within your own being, within your own mind, within your heart, so to speak. That one page represents every time you did that as a kid. Every time you made up a story about this existing character, it all comes back to you. You're buying back nostalgia. You're buying back your youth. And I think with something like Tom Neely's The Blot, and this being the 10th anniversary of its publication and pieces finally being available for purchase, it's a more sophisticated type of story than, say, a Batman comic usually is. It's much more high concept. As you kind of get a sense and walk down here, this is perhaps the most symbolic of what we think of when we think of illustrated comic book art, that this looks like a comic book page. And it's classic in that way. And if you are looking to collect pages from an award-winning comic, this might be a natural for you if you also collect Tintin, or if you also collect, other European, maybe not superhero type comics. Whereas this next page, this battle with full frontal male nudity and red pencil and capturing a certain amount of motion, this is a very different type of thing. I mean, the person who owns that page may not like this image, may not even know it exists if they're not familiar with the comic, if they're only buying it for what it is on the surface as a beautiful drawing. They can choose to have that context limited to just that single page. And I think with the indies, with the independent comics, especially in that post-Mao's era, the post-Fantagraphics era, that more personal stories became more important to people. And certainly you didn't just see comic book movies of Superman and the X-Men, you saw Scott Pilgrim, you saw comic book adaptations of Harvey Picar's comics, American Splendor. And to see these things adapted into real life, it's interesting because I think that sometimes those comic creators were just trying to find a visual expression of their real life anyways. So in a way, the comic was a step towards getting back to a different representation of their reality.